Dr. Zakiya. Welcome to the first interview of the Speakers Forum. Our theme will be diversity and inclusion, and we will talk a little bit about your life and career, about your stance on diversity and inclusion, and we will conclude with a few rapid fire questions.
Thank you so much for having me on today, and thank you so much for organizing and developing this forum.
You're very welcome, and it is our pleasure to have you. Dr. Zakiya, for everyone, is the Associate Dean of Diversity and Inclusion in the College of Science, and we're very happy to have her with us today. So let's go ahead and get started with the first part of our interview, which is questions about your life and career. So can you please tell us a little bit about yourself? What is your life's path?
Oh, that's amazing. So, I'm very much a Southern girl, Southern lady. I was born and raised in Mississippi in small towns. And I think of myself very much as a Southern lady because every single day when I would leave home, my parents, my grandparents would tell us to act like a lady. And I don't think I really realized how ingrained and how much a part of who I am it was until as I, started to transverse my career. Congruent with that was this call to always remember your community and think through how are you going to help and support your community. Like, you've been blessed with so much, how are you going to help others? Like, how are you going to extend those blessings? And so I became a chemist by training. My undergraduate and my graduate degrees are in chemistry. But in the midst of pursuing those degrees, I found that I had a love and a passion for helping others in STEM disciplines realize their own dreams. And that's kind of led to me being on the path of working in diversity and inclusion and STEM education, and a host of other things. And so I received my PhD in chemistry from LSU. I consider it one of my academic homes. And it's just been a real blessing to be able to contribute in what I've always considered to be one of my academic homes and doing some good work.
Thank you. You wrote a piece that was a letter to yourself in the past, and in that piece, you said that you don't fit into boxes. How and when did you come up to this realization?
So, that's a good question. I realized I didn't fit into boxes when I was really finishing up my PhD work and thinking through what's really going to be the next step. Um, I knew that I enjoyed academia, but I also knew that I did not want to, at that point, be a regular chemist. Like, I was a computational chemist. I did not want to sit in front of computers all day long. I enjoyed other aspects of my job, and so, or some of the work that I've been engaged in. And so, what I realized was that in wanting to be in academia and not wanting to have the traditional faculty role, that I would have to chart a different pathway. And so, just immediately, I didn't fit into that box. And so I had to figure out how I would find my own niche in academia. I had to expand my learning in other areas for which, the PhD was extremely important because it teaches you how to problem solve, how to be tenacious, how to have confidence in your ability to navigate challenges and find opportunities. And so I found that I didn't fit into the boxes, and that was absolutely okay, but it meant that I had to figure out my own path. And that's been a big component of my journey along the way. I've been extremely blessed as I've gone through those to have phenomenal mentors who've helped me, and I've tried to pay them back by helping others and mentoring others as I've moved through.
That's great. How did you decide to pursue research and teaching? And what makes you passionate about what you do?
Well, towards the end of grad school, I kind of mentioned I was at a crossroads roads of sorts. So um, I'd had several faculty position options. I also had some other options. And I just knew that I wanted to study and do good work, but I didn't want to do it in the traditional ways in which I was doing it. When I first came to grad school, I thought that I was interested in doing a combination of PhD and law degree and pursuing intellectual property law. But as I became more interested in student development, I ended up pursuing my alternate pathway, and then moving into more STEM ed research, thinking through how do we craft environments that support student success, regardless of their background. What does it mean to create an inclusive environment? What do we think about students in their agency? How do we help with their self efficacy? And a host of other kinds of things that really impacts how we navigate higher ed.
Thank you so much. If you could start all over again, what sort of advice would you give to your younger self?
So I think that the most important thing is to be true to who you are. Um, and that can be a little challenging, particularly as you're learning and finding yourself along the way. Because you're like, what's real? Am I accepted? Do they like me? Are my ideas good? There's this moment of where people are making judgments of you, where you're really trying to figure out who you are and crafting that out. But as you're doing that and developing confidence in your skills, I would encourage you to be truly true to yourself, knowing that the gifts that you have will make room for you. But at the same time, work to understand the game that you're playing. So, like career wise, what is it that you have to do to be successful? What are the markers of success that you have to achieve? And so, in the midst of being true to yourself, feed your soul, do things that give you energy, do things that feed your motivation. But at the same time, you can't do that at the expense of not meeting those markers of success, which are required in order for you to stay in and be able to achieve at high levels the goals that you have for yourself in terms of what your career pathway would look like in higher ed or in any other field.
And is this the same sort of advice that you would also give to other students who are starting?
Absolutely. I mean, there's a hidden culture that impacts decision making, regardless of what it is you're doing. Like there's what does it take to be successful? And so the things that I would tell myself, I would tell others. That's the whole point of paying it forward. It's what people have told me, and what I think we should do in terms of telling others. And it's that you need to know what are the road markers for success. Like what are the stop signs that you need to go past? What are the road signs that you need to pass at what point in time to be able to get to your destination? And as you're doing that, don't lose yourself in the midst of that process. Take care of yourself as you're moving along that process. Celebrate yourself as you're moving along that process. Do well for yourself as you're moving along that process, and do well for others. It doesn't have to be a all or nothing. But I see with um, a lot of individuals who have a sense of community, who want to give back to community, sometimes that passion for that can overtake them um, achieving what they need to achieve along their own pathway to actually get to where they want to go, where they could have an even greater impact. And so I think that it's vitally important to understand the game you're playing in and play it to win, and also to feed your soul along the way.
That is some great advice for our students. Thank you for talking to us about your life and career journey. Now let's talk a little bit about diversity and inclusion. Why Why are diversity and inclusion important for you?
So, so I loosely define diversity as representation in a room and inclusion as the lived experience of those individuals who are in those spaces. And so I think that diversity and inclusion is very, very important because we all have this capital. We all have these talents. All have these gifts. And I believe that each one of those talents and each one of those gifts is uniquely positioning us to solve a problem, to contribute to an innovation, to make life better for all of humanity. We're here with a purpose. And I think that it's incumbent upon us to create environments where people can maximize those gifts, maximize those talents for the greater good of all. It sounds somewhat Pollyanna. It's a very uh, you know wonderful world that that would be in, and I understand that we don't always live in that world. But I mean, that's the ideal, right? That if we have great talents, why would we waste them? Why would we put people in positions of where they're not able to do the very best that they could do, so that we could actually all have the benefits from that? Like, what do we lose when we don't do that? And so that optimization of human capital, um, that development of places where people can work, live, and breathe and do wonderful things. I think that that's why diversity and inclusion are important, not just for me, but for everyone.
And along these lines, what are your responsibilities as the Associate Dean of Diversity and Inclusion in the College of Science?
So I have seven priorities. Yes, seven priorities guide the work that we do specifically me and my office that we do in the College of Science. So we collaborate with our diversity committee to set priorities and develop initiatives. We have a task force on undergraduate education, which has been focused on student success and retention. Um, the Office of Strategic Initiatives, which serves as an incubator of sorts for programming that support student development. I collaborate with them on mentoring and other programmatic options that support College of Science students and faculty members, taking a leadership role on the LSU Advance proposal and project. We've recently been funded for a Catalyst project through the National Science Foundation, which is focused on that Catalyst project is focused on faculty diversity. We have a focus on a priority on developing workshops on diversity and inclusion for our college, and so we offer those on a semi-regular basis. Working with the College of Science departments on graduate recruitment and retention, and advising and disseminating student successes, diversity, and inclusion efforts in our college and beyond. And so there are many different priorities that we have, in addition to a fairly robust K-12 outreach effort that we've been leading in the last few years. And so that's been a good component of what we do. All of that is undergirded by this push to pull in extramural support for broadening participation in fostering inclusive excellence among our students and faculty and staff.
That's great. And can we talk a little bit about some specific initiatives that you are part of? For example, we can start with the SCI lead.
Sure. So SCI lead, so SCI for that actually stands for Student Champions for Inclusion. And so that initiative was developed so that we could have a student council in my office that would focus on developing leadership skills even as they went out to do good works for their peers. So the idea was is that we would develop a leadership learning laboratory where they would come in and learn about communication, they come in and learn about conflict resolution, project development, strategic planning, a host of these kinds of skills that are useful for the students and skills that are transferable when they actually leave our institution to go out into the workforce. But that while they were here, they would participate in that learning, that leadership learning laboratory, and then they would identify challenges that they see that they and their peers may be having. And that they would use those skills to actually meet a couple of challenges. So on any given year, our SILE group gets together. They do their leadership meetings, but then they also decide on two or three activities that they would lead for our college. Last year, they led what they call minute mentor meetings, where students could come in and just get sage advice from a peer mentor, an older students that's kind of been navigating undergrad. They also noted last year that there were a lot of students who were not able to present their work at national conferences because so many of them were canceled. So in June, they held an international research webinar where they had around 40 something presentations of students who weren't able to present their work during their national meetings. We had provided a forum for students to present their work. And they've done other things largely focused on outreach. They support all of our outreach initiatives, which have included a story time, Girls' Day at the Museum, outreach with, goodness gracious, outreach with TikTok videos for home outreach activities, doing science in the lab at home, and a host of other kinds of things. And so we've been very grateful for their leadership in our college and seeing what they have been doing. Another program that we have is called SOARS, and it's a scholarship program that's also funded by the National Science Foundation. And it's kind of amazing because it provides scholarships for students who are really, really smart but who have financial need. And so we're in our first cohort of students this fall, all majors in the College of Science, who are given access to that scholarship, but also resources for navigating college. And then our last program that I told you about is our Inclusive Excellence series. And this series was developed to highlight scientific leaders from across the country and beyond who are doing phenomenal work as scientists. They're at the top of their fields in that area. But then they also have a passion for people. And so they realize that passion through prominent work in education, outreach, or working with diverse populations of students or colleagues. And so they're not just being exemplary scientists or mathematicians, but they put that passion to use in terms of how they're impacting their world.
We wish you the best of luck with all these initiatives, and it does sound like they're very useful. Now, can you please tell us what is the manifestation of diversity and inclusion in academia? What are some examples of a diverse environment? What are some examples of a not so diverse environment?
So that's a great question. So academia is really known for its intellectual spaces, right? Like it's this place where we come and we think and we do. And in academia, ideas are really that currency that pushes what we do, right? We're advancing knowledge. We're either creating knowledge, advancing knowledge, discovering new things, finding new applications. But all of it's idea based, right? It's that you have an idea and it gets manifest in some kind of way. And so with that manifestation comes, who's in the room developing those ideas? Whose ideas are represented? What is the representation of those individuals that are in those spaces? And what is belonging like? What is a sense of belonging of those individuals in those spaces? And so I think that representation and belonging play an incredible role in the full recognition and celebration of ideas. If you've ever been in a space where ideas are marginalized by virtue of the messenger, like who gets heard, or celebrated by virtue of the messenger, like this person's ideas are automatically, lauded over others. What does that mean for all the other individuals in those spaces? And so I think that that manifestation of diversity and inclusion in academia means that we give rise to an environment where we welcome thinkers in all of our spaces, whether it's an academic space, a professional space, a community space, or any other space. And we let those ideas flourish by just the virtue of who those individuals are and what they're contributing, and not just the packaging in which those ideas come forth. I mentioned a little bit earlier on about the grand world where folks are able to do great work without the barriers of bias and other kinds of things that limit their agency or limit the way in which they're viewed. And I think that that manifestation of diversity and inclusion in academia are is really realized when we create the spaces that allow that to happen, when we allow greatness to flow.
And how would you advocate for diversity and inclusion with colleagues or students who don't understand its importance?
Oh no, that's an interesting thing to think about. So in our country in particular, when we start thinking about diversity and inclusion, usually the first thing that comes to mind is race, ethnicity, and gender. More recently, we broadened that tent of thinking about diversity and inclusion to include sexual orientation. We've included ableness now, and disability status, and all of that good stuff. Um, but we're still not always fully cognizant of what exactly is diversity and how are we welcoming particularly identities that are very different from our own. Like, how do we develop a greater consciousness around that? And then how do we create those spaces that are welcoming to all of those individuals, right? I think that it's very much a personal choice to make it a priority to learn to create those spaces. I think it's a personal choice to learn to be more sensitive to others and to understand and see where when biases are happening or when um, folks are not able to operate in their best light in the best spaces. And for some, that whole personal choice becoming a priority is really a part of their core values. It's a part of who they are. And for others, it may not be. I think that regardless of whether or not it's a part of your core values or not, there is really an economic imperative for us to be able to fully realize human potential, to capitalize on the human capital that's in our spaces. And I think that it's very challenging to choose to be exclusive and choose to be great at the same time. And so, challenging with those notions are, I think, is very important. Being in a position where you can talk about what drives you and what drives your passion for diversity is important. But I also think being able to share how this fits the bottom line and how we need to be able to create spaces where ideals flow in the very best way possible is also incredibly important.
Thank you so much for sharing your insight on diversity and inclusion with us. Now, let us move to the final part of our interview, where I will ask you some rapid fire questions.
Mm-hmm.
So, what is your favorite historical figure?
Sojourner Truth. Partially because of her Ain't I a Woman speech during the Women's Rights Convention in Ohio in 1851.
And who is your favorite author?
Well, this varies quite a bit. When I get a chance to read for pleasure, which is non work related reading, I enjoy science fiction and historical novels, and so it just kind of sort of migrates over time.
If you were president of the United States, what would be the first thing that you would do?
Pull together a great team to manage and lead through the multitude of challenges and opportunities that we face as a nation. You can't do it alone. And so I think the first thing you need to do is get your team together.
Do you prefer NFL or NBA?
NFL all the way.
And if you had the chance to trade your life with someone, who would that be?
Absolutely no one. So let me tell you why. I believe that I am uniquely designed to live my life. And if I tried to live anyone else's life, I'm not created to fit in their shoes. And I like my shoes. I think my shoes are good shoes. And so there's no one that I would like to change places with.
I think that's awesome. One thing, and now let's move to our final question for today. What is one thing that you cannot leave your house without?
My iPhone and my keys. Okay, I did too. But like, I have to have my iPhone and I need keys to get in and out of my house. That's very fundamental, right?
Mhm. Thank you so much for devoting your time to us today and sharing your insight. It was a pleasure talking with you.
Thank you so much for organizing this and for inviting me. I've had an absolute pleasure chatting with you all today.
Me as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you for watching our first interview. For more exciting content, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook.